the sixth night, the cabin began to make sounds. It started in the late afternoon. A small creak in the rafters. The kind of creak you might hear in any old building when the temperature changes. Aslak, who had been sharpening his knife, looked up. Then a second creak, from the wall this time, behind Henrik's bunk. Then a third from the corner, then a fourth from the floor under the table. By dusk, the cabin was creaking on all sides in a slow, measured rhythm, the way a wooden ship creaks in a heavy sea. There was no wind outside. The air was perfectly still, but the cabin was groaning as if it were being squeezed by some enormous, patient hand. Aslak said, "She is testing the walls." Jonas said, "Will the walls hold?" Aslak said, "The walls will hold, but she is finding the weak places. She will know by morning where to come in." Jonas asked in a voice that was very small, "How does she come in?" Aslak looked at him. He said, "Through the door, always through the door. They cannot cross a threshold without being invited, but she has had 6 days to prepare an invitation." Jonas did not understand what this meant. He would before dawn. That night, the woman in the blue dress did not stand outside the cabin. She had gone. The clearing was empty. This, Aslak said, was worse. The 7th night, somebody knocked on the door. It was 11:42 in the evening. Aslak had marked the time later when he gave his testimony, because the hour had stayed in his mind with absolute clarity. The knock came 3 times. It was a polite, ordinary knock, the kind of knock a man might give on a friend's door on a winter evening when his hands are too cold to fumble for a key. A voice on the other side of the door said, "Boys, it's me. Open up. I'm freezing." The voice was Henrik's. It was not Henrik's the way an impression of Henrik would be Henrik's. It was Henrik's voice the way a recording of Henrik's voice would be Henrik's voice. Every grain of it, every roughness from 40 years of cold air and pipe tobacco, the slight softness at the end of the consonants, the way he half swallowed his vowels. Aslak was sitting at the table. Jonas was on his bunk. Both of them turned to look at Henrik's body, which was still lying under the blanket on the far bunk, and which had not moved since 2 o'clock the previous morning. The voice came again. "Boys, come on. Aslak, Jonas, open the door." I went out for some air and the wind blew it shut behind me. I'm going to lose my fingers out here. Jonas felt his hand, the one not holding the bone, begin to move toward the bar on the door. He stopped it with his other hand. He bit the inside of his cheek hard enough to bring blood. The voice came a 3rd time, slightly different now, softer, almost laughing. "Boys, don't be like that. Aslak, open the door. It's cold out here. I have a story to tell you about what I saw in the trees." And then, after a pause, in a voice that was not quite Henrik's anymore, but was wearing his accent like a coat, "Jonas, open the door, Jonas. I have a message from your girl, from your Karen in Trondheim. She told me to tell you she will marry you. She told me to tell you yes. She is waiting for you in the trees. Open the door, Jonas." Jonas did not know how the thing on the other side of the door knew Karen's name. He had not said it out loud since the helicopter dropped them off. Aslak stood up. He walked very slowly to the door. He did not unbar it. He pressed his forehead against the wood. He spoke softly in North Sami for perhaps 30 seconds. words Jonas could not understand. The voice on the other side of the door went silent. Then it began to laugh. It was Henrik's laugh at first. Then it was a woman's laugh, low and amused, the kind of laugh that is just on the edge of a song. Then it was both at once, layered, the way a choir sounds when two voices are singing different lines of the same hymn. Then it was something else entirely, a sound that was not human and had never been human, a sound that was the sound a forest might make if it could open its throat and laugh. The laugh went on for a long time, and then, finally, it stopped. There was silence. The cabin creaked once, and then it did not creak again. In the morning, when Aslak finally lifted the shutter and looked out, the clearing was empty. The snow was perfect. There was not a single footprint anywhere outside the cabin, not even Aslak's from where he had walked the day before. The snow had erased every mark. She was gone. The supply snowmobile came in the early afternoon, a day ahead of schedule. The driver was a man named Eirik Brandt. When he saw Henrik's body and Aslak's face and Jonas, who was sitting on the bunk with the bone in his hand and who had not spoken since the laugh, he did not ask questions. He radioed for the helicopter. He helped Aslak wrap Henrik for transport. It was Eirik who found, in the snow behind the cabin on the north side, a single small object lying on top of the perfect powder. He brought it inside. It was a wooden hairpin, hand-carved, old. The kind of hairpin a Norwegian peasant woman might have worn 300 years ago. He held it out to Aslak. Aslak refused to touch it. Aslak said in a flat voice, "Burn it, now, in the stove. Do not bring it out of this cabin." Eirik did. The pin burned with a strange green flame, and the smoke that rose from it smelled very faintly of pine sap and of something underneath the pine sap, something old and animal. When the helicopter came, the 3 living men loaded Henrik's body into it, and they flew out, and they did not look back at the cabin. The cabin, as far as I have been able to determine from the records of the Norwegian Forestry Service, was never used again. The contract was completed by a different crew at a different site the following year. The cabin was struck from the supply route in 1989. It is, presumably, still standing in the Bymarka forest, somewhere north of Trondheim, if you know where to look. I would advise you not to look. Henrik Solberg was buried in his home village in March of 1988. The official cause of death was hypothermia. His son took his own life 6 months later. Aslak Sera returned to Finnmark. He did not work in the southern forests again. He raised his children. He became a respected elder in his community. He gave his testimony to a folklorist named Inga Saroma in 2017, the year before his death, on the condition that it would not be released until after he was gone. The recording is kept in the Sami archives in Kautokeino. It is 44 minutes long. I have heard it. I will not be quoting from it directly, out of respect for his family. Jonas Aas, the boy who looked at her face, lived for 16 more years. He went home to Levanger. He did not marry Karin from Trondheim. Karin, when he came back, found that he had become a different person. He was very quiet. He could not be alone in a room with the light off. He would not go into any forest for any reason. He worked in his father's hardware store. He drank too much. He did not have children. He died in 2003 of liver failure at the age of 40. The day before he died, in the hospital, his older brother Erling sat at his bedside. Jonas was lucid. Jonas asked very quietly for the lights to be turned off. Erling turned them off. Jonas said, "She is in the corner, Erling. She has been in the corner since I came back. She has been waiting for me. She is smiling. She is so beautiful." Erling, who did not believe in this kind of thing, looked into the corner. There was nothing there. He turned back to his brother. He took his hand. He said, "Don't go to her, Jonas. Stay with me." Jonas said, "Erling, it has been 16 years. I am very tired. I think it is time to dance." He closed his eyes. He went to sleep. He did not wake up. Erling told this story to the folklorist Ronald Grambo in 1991, when Jonas was still alive but had begun to lose his grip. He told it again after Jonas's death on a second tape. Both tapes are in the National Archive. Both can be requested. Both will, I believe, change you if you listen to them all the way through. There is, in the old Norwegian folk saying, a line that goes, "The forest does not forget a face it has loved." I had thought before I came to this story that this was a beautiful line, a line about memory and about the long patience of nature. After 3 days of reading the Oz tapes and the Sarah recording, I do not think it is a beautiful line anymore. I think it is a warning. If you are watching this in a country that has a forest, do not, tonight, look out of your bedroom window for too long. Do not search the dark between the trees. Do not, if you see a figure standing very still at the edge of the cut, raise your hand and wave. She remembers Jonas. She is patient. There are others. I'm the Midnight Whisperer. Tomorrow's story comes from the boreal forests of central Alberta in Canada, from the year 1879, from a man named Swift Runner, who walked out of the bush in the spring with a story that no one believed, until the bones were found. Subscribe so the bell finds you in the dark. Sleep well.